Thanks for taking time out of your day to continue to learn. Today we're going to talk a little bit about creative assessment and voice and choice. And I kind of got into it. I'm originally an English teacher by profession and by training. And from there, I started to do a lot of work with e-portfolios. And I realized when students had a lot more ownership of their learning, then they really started to embrace it and get more invested, and then they started to really create some amazing pieces. And so although for the past few years I've been working as a tech coach, next year I'm a curriculum leader at my school because we're really looking at assessment and giving students a lot more ownership of their assessment. And so that's what this brief little talk today is hopefully going to inspire you in that regard as well. So I'll share some ideas with you, and feel free to also put your ideas in the chat. First off, I just wanted to give you a quick background on me. That's me, the taller one, although actually I'm not anymore. That was just Christmas, and both my boys have already surpassed me in height. In addition to being a teacher, I'm also a mom of 3 children, and I think that's a huge part of what inspires me to teach, is that I want to create learning experiences that my children love as much as myself. And so, they're all in school with me on a regular basis. And so I kind of do it for them, and I think about choices I would want as a child as well. And they're a good group to ask their opinion on a pretty regular basis. So that's my children. Yeah, those glasses are fun, aren't they? All right. When we start talking about assessment, we really need to have a clear purpose, and knowing what is the purpose of the assessment and who will use those results, what will those results be used to assess, and what will we use those results to do in the future. And that kind of aligns itself well with a target. So at my school, we talk about targets, and target kind of encompasses a lot of different things. It's synonymous with both the standards, the objectives, the goals, and the benchmarks. They should be clear to both the student and to the teacher. And when we're talking about online learning, I think that's really important, because sometimes you can totally go off on different tangents, and then you realize right now I'm working on my doctorate, and it's an online program, and unless you have clear targets about what it is, your learning targets about what you're supposed to be doing, you can end up doing something that's completely off the mark. And so I've learned as both a teacher and a student of online learning that clear targets really help a lot. And there are 5 basic targets that kind of break things down into. One is a knowledge, another is reasoning, and then skill, product, and disposition. So I'm going to go through those just briefly and then talk about different ways we can assess those things. Knowledge really encompasses knowledge and understanding targets. It's like factual information, procedural knowledge, and conceptual understanding. So it's like a student recognizes obtuse or right angles, or describe how many organisms interact with each other and transfer energy and matter into an ecosystem. A reasoning target is a little bit different. It's a thought processes students are to learn to do incredibly well. So, well, not incredibly well, but well. So it uses data from random samples to draw inferences about a population with an unknown characteristic of interest, or possibly another example would be drawing conclusions from experimental, it can be scientific, technical, things of that nature. Skill targets are a demonstration of a physical skill or a performance at the heart of learning. Many times we're tempted to identify a standard as a target skill, but it can be different. A skill does not necessarily refer to mental skills, and with a skill target, it's a real-time performance rather than the product. And that's where I think as teachers, sometimes we mess those up a little bit. And so it's more of a real-time performance. So an example of that might be integrating voice into character development in a theater type setting, or the measurement of properties of objects using balance and thermometers, like it's real time. But I think oftentimes we think of a skill as we can mix up kind of the skills and the products. The product is really the artifact, where the creation of the product is the main focus of the learning. And sometimes we end up assessing the end product instead of the thinking and the process that went into the end product. And I think there's a little bit of confusion sometimes there. So this is really where the specification for the quality of the product itself is the focus of the teaching and assessment. So for example, it might be creating an accurate and complete and organized display of data obtained through a scientific investigation, or writing an opinion piece on topics or texts supporting a point of view with reasons and information. But many times we'll say, oh, can you create a film about your thinking? And what we do is we're assessing the final film instead of their process of thinking throughout. Does that make sense? So when we're designing assessment, it really comes down to creating a sound design. So what method are we going to use to assess? What are the quality of questions that we'll be using? How are we going to target them? And how do we avoid bias? And this is a key component of that is effective communication, how to manage information, how to report the information, and to whom. Oh, I just noticed in the side chat, someone asked about the presentation. I use this great presentation. I really recommend it. It's called Haiku Deck, and it helps you create really beautiful slides, and they're all Creative Commons stamped, so you're giving credit back to the original author who created them. So it's really useful to use with students to help them understand that digital literacy piece and giving credit back to others. Little side note. All right, in addition to effective communication, this is the key component to me, is student involvement. And the students are really the end users of any assessment that we design and create. But they also need to understand the targets as well, and they can also assess themselves, and they can track their progress and communicate that progress in a variety of different ways. As we mentioned in the beginning, I'm a huge fan of e-portfolios, and I really think that that provides students ownership of their learning. I'm using them a lot in my courses right now. I'm teaching three different courses that are not even necessarily totally related. I'm teaching an AP junior class, so we're doing English literature. Then I'm also teaching an intro to programming course and an intro to game design. And throughout all three of those courses, I have my students kind of document their learning and assess their progress throughout throughout the course and throughout.
Yeah, sorry about that, everyone. I'm sure Dana's just going to, she's just obviously shut her microphone off, and she'll probably be back in a minute or so, hopefully, and we'll be able to get us back online again. No problem.
Back on?
Yes, we can hear you. Fantastic. Great. Thanks, Dana. Sorry about that. We can just keep going. Thanks, Dana. Back to you.
Okay. No problem. Sorry about that. You gotta love connectivity and technology when it bails on you. Um, So for pre-assessment, that's something that we do, I think, as teachers, almost it's ingrained in what we do, but it's difficult to do sometimes when we're teaching online because you don't have students in the classroom and you can't get a feel in the same way. So I have just a couple little ways that we can look at that with online learning. Um, one way could be to visualize and have students be an illustrator prior to even beginning an assessment. So for example, sometimes what I'll do is I will just put in a little snippet of a like a section of a story and have students, they can't see, they have no idea the context of that. And then I'll have them, you can use different mobile learning devices, tools to have them draw or create something or even just post it and upload that of what they think that is. And it gives them a visual illustration of what it is that they think they're about to embark upon. In addition to that, we don't really use chalkboards anymore, and online we don't have whiteboards in quite the same way, although there are, definitely through uh, uh, different avenues, like Big Blue Button, we can use whiteboards, but you can have students all respond to a prompt or a question if you're doing it in time at the same time. And it create that to get the thought process going and started. Padlet is awesome. Thanks, Teresa. I've used that a lot with my students, and they'll upload different examples of different things. We just did a whole thing on Plato's Allegory of the Cave, and they uploaded all of their ideas of what they thought that might be prior to even embarking on that. That's an excellent idea. During assessment, there's also lots of formative assessments that we do as teachers when we're just kind of taking a look and trying to decide, okay, how are we going? Can we move on to the next step? One of my favorite things to do is to use a back channel, and I use this a lot with my class. One of my favorites is to use Today's Meet, and I'll have students, it's free to sign up for a session, and I can keep it going for like a month, a week, a day, and have students be able to comment and talk about and add ideas kind of exactly the same way we're using the chat right now on the side, and help them discuss their thinking and share questions on a topic that's being taught. Additionally, I love to have students put in additional resources and do a search. We just did the bell jar in my class, and then my students, I had them all go out and see who could find the most interesting information and like gossip about the bell jar and Sylvia Plath, just to get the class going. And they were putting in links to articles and all different kinds of things, and it keeps things going as well. It's especially good, I know I teach in the international schools, and it's incredibly helpful for my students who English may not be their primary language, because they tend to like to think for a while before they state something, and they want to make sure that their English is, that they're not making a mistake speaking out loud. So it gives them time to formulate their thoughts and place them in a context where they feel a little safer. Additionally, it can help your shy students come out. As far as the back channel as well, I do it a lot when we do debates in my class, and I'll have 2 or 3 people work on the sidelines and then create the back channel to overhear kind of the different conversations that are happening. And generally, I will pick someone who is not someone who's going to jump into the debate in the same way. In my PhD program, we use Google Hangout, and we have chats for all my different classes. So if a teacher is talking and we're not really certain and we don't want to interrupt the entire class, we use the Hangout chats, and we talk to each other, and we're in all different parts of the world, so it helps a lot, because when I'm up at 6 o'clock in the morning here, well, it might be 3 a.m. in Europe, and it could be 6 p.m. and everyone's making dinner in the States. And so having a chat, a Google Hangout, can be helpful as well for a back channel. Another thing that use a lot in schools are clickers. Now, sometimes this can be more old school, even though they still seem really new to some schools, but it's a student response system. But there are ones that I think are really helpful for using with students. One is called Socrative, and there's also another one called Poll Anywhere. And you can put something out there for students to be able to just shoot out their answers for whatever it is that you're talking about. So do you agree or disagree with blah, blah, blah? And then they can click right in and give you an answer as you go along. Oh, goodness. Thank you, Lindsay. And Socrative, I did just mention it, but what I love about Socrative as well is you can log into a virtual Socrative classroom, and the teachers can pre-post or put on-the-spot questions for students to respond to. But another one that I use a lot is Nearpod, and I use this with my students because one thing that I like about it is it also controls their screen. So they're moving along in the presentation with me, and it also, if they have iPads, they can draw their ideas, and I get them all live right at that moment, but it's private, so everyone else doesn't have to see, and I can see whether we're going to move on or we need to slow down and I need to go back over an idea. Another idea for assessment is to have students create different photos. They can choose 2 or 3 different photos that represent a process, or they can write captions for different photos and put together short summaries and organize them. Most online tools, especially like Moodle, you can put them like in like a media album and have them organize them and put them and spread them around and create a story out of different photos. But post-assessment is where I think we spend a lot of our time as teachers in trying to design really strong assessments, summative assessments. But they don't all have to be quite so formal. So one of the things that I'm a terrible test taker, horrible. I don't even know how I get total test anxiety. Multiple choice, true, false has always been the bane of my existence. And so anyway, I like to try to come up with different ways to assess learning that students don't necessarily realize they're being tested, but they are. So for instance, one way you can do that is to have students do quick summaries. And so what I like to do is to do 3 different summaries. So the first one, I will say that they have only 10 to 15 words to summarize something that we learned. Then I'll tell them they only have 30 to 50 words. And within 30 to 50 words, they have to summarize that same learning. Then they have to do it in 75 to 100 words. We put that all in a community space, and then they have to go and look and see, well, if you only have 10 to 15 words to summarize the learning of an entire class or an entire unit, what are they going to say? And that's going to be a lot different than the 75 to 100. It kind of reminds me of when I was younger and my brother and I were growing up, and we'd come home from a vacation and we'd have totally different memories of what happened on that vacation. And I think students have that too. And so doing a summary type assessment like that really helps you to see what are they getting out of it, and then within one classroom, are they getting the same thing? And it's fun to hear the different details that they pay attention to as well. Another fun one to do with students sometimes is to have them, depending on the age of the students, but I've done this even in high schools, is to have my students write a postcard to either a political figure or a historical figure describing some sort of historical event, or to scientists or to the author. And yes, when I do the summaries of other students, it depends. It depends on whether it is a final assessment or if it is a ongoing formative assessment. And so I like to do, it depends on the way that I'm doing it. I don't always let them see the summaries until they're all done if it's a summative assessment. Okay, so postcards are one way that they can do that, and then they're also limited in discussing what it is that they feel as if they learned or questions they might have about, an author or a time period. But one of my favorite things, this sounds they're really quite simple. We do note card confessionals a lot, and we started doing this at my old school with, and students would do a lot of independent reading, and we wanted them not to do book reports at the end, but we wanted them to completely um, come up with different, to get other students intrigued on a book. And so we had kind of a template for them to fill out about how the author had changed or what they may have learned throughout the book. And then the students would film themselves and just go through. There was no voice, they didn't have to talk, and they would go through and flip the note cards and create 2-minute almost movie trailers on a book that they had read, and then we would post them all to our class website so that they could take a look at them. I have an example. I don't know if it's going to come up in here, but I figured I could pick on my own son. Let me see if it will come up really quick. I don't know if it's going to come up. If it doesn't, I can put it in the next slide. I can put it in. Let's see if it will play. Not sure if it's going to play because I had to download it as a PDF. I'll put the link in down here, but so they would go through and they became really powerful and great ways for me to have, understanding whether they had read the book or not, because it wasn't a book report of sorts. Another assessment that I do with students sometimes is just called 3 things. So I'll ask them at the end of a unit or an assessment. I just did this today with my intro to programming class. What are 3 things that a fellow student might misunderstand about this unit? What is it so then they're not taking ownership themselves as saying, oh yeah, I misunderstood this. They're saying, oh, you know what, in the future, someone might misunderstand this, or someone might be really confused about this. And then it gives me an idea of where I can go back. So that's actually more of an assessment of myself, maybe, and of the unit than their actual assessment of their learning. But it also can show me those windows in of where I can go to help them in the future. One of my favorite things to do is to have my students create their own quizzes or tests before an exam. So at the school I was at last year, no matter what kinds of different types of assessment you would do, for example, we did Lord of the Flies, and I had put the students put all the characters on trial for murder, and then they served as jurors in different parts of the jury, and we did this whole thing to really assess learning in the classroom. But the school was very more traditional in nature, and they said, well, Dana, you still need a test. You need an actual paper pencil test, which, as I mentioned, drives me insane. So I had my students actually create the quiz test that they thought I should give for Lord of the Flies. So they sat in groups, and I had one group create multiple choice questions, another one do some true false, another one do a fill in the blank, and then they all created essay questions that they thought would be really talk to the essence of the book. A, that helps them study a lot, and B, it gives me great ideas of what it is they think they should be tested on, and then many times I give them sections of the quiz or test that they just created, and so they'll be in the middle of the test, be like, oh, I wrote that question. But it really is kind of a fun way to look at assessment with students feeling as if they have a voice about where they really feel like they were targeted. Next week we have final exams at my school, and we are actually, my final exam in my AP Junior English class is going to be basically a doodle. Please don't tell my students because they don't know this yet. But all they have seen so far for the final exam is a huge box of markers. And I told them that's all that they will need. They don't need to come in with anything else. And so what I'm going to do is in my classroom, there will be huge poster, not even poster, that like roll out paper for like a bulletin board all over the walls. And then I'm going to have just the essential questions of the course, and the students will doodle and not necessarily mind map kind of how they feel those questions were answered throughout the semester, and they each will have their own different color. Online, there are multitudes of different mind mapping software that you can use to have students do that as well, and then you can kind of trace their thinking and linear thinking around the essential questions and the main components of a unit. Our students don't have any idea that we're going to do that yet. This is actually, I'll put links into this. This is my, this is another example from one of my children where he doodled out and did almost like a stop animation of his ideas of helium and what helium and how helium is produced and the cycle of helium with another student in his class. I'll put the link in a few moments. Another piece is I'll have my students do just exit flips. You've heard of exit flips, I'm certain, before, but I'll have them, I'll give them just a short like quiz or a few simple questions as they leave the class to make sure that they actually, the learning targets that I had created for that day were actually achieved. And then I live on Google Forms. I use them a lot, and I like to create them for students. You know, you can either create an exam in a Google form or a test of some sort, or you can give feedback to other students. So my students in my game design class just designed these beautiful digital games using Game Salad. And then I create a feedback form for my students. And so when the students are up portraying their game, every student will be engaged because they also will be filling out according to the rubric and the criteria we had set up for designing the game. They're giving feedback to the student. Then the student, I send it, I Fluberize it. If you haven't used Flubaroo, it's really quite fun. And it's an additional like script that you can add into a Google form, and it self-marks the quizzes, but it can also then shoot an email out to the students and give them their feedback back. So then my students will get their feedback from the students, and then they have to reflect on that before I even give them a grade. So then they hear the feedback from the students, they think about, they reflect upon their own learning, and then I reflect on the learning as well. So they're getting kind of 3 different assessments of their learning, their own self-assessment, student assessment, and myself, which can be helpful. Oh, I already went to Flubaroo, sorry. Texting, there are things called Wi-Fi. I think I'm saying it correctly. Let me type it in. What it is it allows students to text in their answer to the site, and it hides their actual identity so they can be honest and they don't have to feel embarrassed about something if they're not certain about an answer. So that's just a quick one. Another one is crowdsourcing. I have students often, I'll take a Google presentation and then I'll just create a slide with their name. And so each person puts it together, all together, and they crowdsource together to create a cohesive whole of something that we're going to do in class. And Twitter, whether they're using the real Twitter or a fake Twitter, I've got an image of fake Twitter here too. I use this a lot with students to have them just summarize in 140 characters what it is they believe that they learned. Or I also have used it, oh, I just spelled characters wrong, sorry. But you can also do hashtags to have them, get them super interested in something that you're going to do. So for example, when a couple years ago, I was just starting to do Catcher in the Rye. And as I was about to do that book in my class, I think I spelled that wrong because I'm trying to type and speak at the same time. My apologies. But anyway, I had my students at the same time J.D. Salinger passed away. And so I showed them how many people were actually talking about the author in the book online via Twitter, so to pique their interest. And then they started participating in all these conversations about Holden Caulfield and J.D. Salinger and the mystery of his life and things of that nature. So whether you do it virtual, online, or you do it within your classroom, and as a fake way, having students put things together via Twitter can be really helpful. But my favorite kind of way to do assessment, obviously, well, like I mentioned before, we do a lot of summative assessments, and so sometimes I'll have my students using the same matrix that I use, like a rubric or something of that, do a self-assessment before, as soon as I give them as soon as they turn in their paper. So with their paper, they'll do the self-assessment. This is, I'll make sure I put the links to these in here, but this is using an iMovie trailer. And the iMovie trailers, for those of you who haven't been on iMovie in a while, are really fantastic because they have a storyboard and already set up in them. So it keeps the movies to 2 minutes. And 2-minute movies from my students are a lot better to watch than the 10-minute movies that every single student might put together, but it keeps it short and sweet. And so I have them, we used iMovie trailers to send out at a couple schools ago that I taught at in Delhi as the invitation to student-led conferences for parents. And the students created these little iMovie trailers so that parents, to intrigue them about the snippets of the learning that they would learn in the day. And so they can be really helpful. And since it's storyboarded in, it keeps them limited. They can put in their own images of these things of that nature and change the font. I mean, not the font, the text, but it also still limits them so they don't go on and on and on and have a 10-minute video of a student who, where it gets a little slow sometimes and they don't really know how to summarize. Now, when it comes to I really think that creativity is the most important part, having kids be able to have the choice. And when they build and create something that requires them to apply what they've learned, it's pretty awesome. We've used in my class this year when we did Plato's Allegory of the Cave, I had one student do everything on oh shoot, why did I just forget the name of it? Minecraft. And he created the entire world of Plato's Minecraft. But then in addition to that, he also created, here, wait a minute, I'll show you the assignment. It's right here. So this was the assignment for my students. So they had to choose one character, and from Sophocles or Plato, and then they also we also looked at the film The Truman Show and The Croods, and they had to answer the question, is knowing more better, from 2 of those characters. Additionally, they had to have their own personal response to is knowing more better. And they got to do a variety of different ways. It was totally open. They could use whatever they wanted to, and there had to be a minimum of 2 different formats for their responses. We used Padlet to have the students upload all of these so they were all in one place. So one student, like I mentioned, recreated a world in Minecraft where he created Plato's Allegory of the Cave. I also had a student create a dance a ballet. She's a ballet dancer where she choreographed the entire thing, put together the music, and then videotaped it, and it literally had me in tears, and it was so phenomenally beautiful. So I try to keep my assessments open for interpretation and let my students choose the medium and the way that they would like to showcase that. I think I'm just about out of time, but I don't know. I'll put a link to this one in here as well. This is the Minecraft video. And I have a couple series of other videos in here that I don't think of student learning that I'll put the links in, so you can watch them on your own time if you're interested. And then I'll click through these really quickly. And one more. Here we go. And lastly, one of the things that we have I have my students do a lot is create tutorials to teach one another. So this next example here is an example of my students, not my students, this was shared with me with a fellow colleague, creating a common craft type style video all about the Black Plague. And then she posted it on her blog so students could go there and learn about the Black Plague. They get tired of hearing our voices sometimes. And so they'll go on and they'll learn and look at them that way as well. And then one last one is I used to use, oh, I just forgot the name of this. It'll come to me in just a second. Shoot, it'll come to me in just a second. I hate that when that happens. Anyway, you can put, as soon as I press play, but it won't play. Here we go. It'll come up. No, it's not going to come up. I'm sorry. Anyway, oh, if you click on the buttons, I'm sorry. If you click on a slide, I believe it brings you straight to the video. If you want to try any of these, but anyway, I was looking at the Odyssey, and so I posted different pieces of the Odyssey because I was really working on looking at my students and having them annotate text. And so they each got to annotate different parts of the text and see the different pieces. And so they could hear other people's voices. They could see why they annotated it and why they made those choices. And so it helped them kind of see different ways and different reasons people were making the choices they were without me standing at the front of the room and telling them to do it. And then this is a quantum leap one that another school did where they pretend like they're Fox News. There's even, I don't know, 2 or 3 more examples. Sorry, I am example heavy, but I like to give examples so that people can go and look. But I really think that you can create really broad guidelines and let the students choose their own platform of how they want to showcase their learning. And it can be, then my students this year literally are blowing me away in the designs that they're creating and the things that they're doing. And today actually happens to be my birthday, and in my class, 10 minutes before this session started, my students gave me this beautiful letter saying that they've never enjoyed English more, and they all are feeling so, I don't know, just the development of English has grown so much. And anyway, I just think that when they feel like they have a choice and they have equal say about what's happening in the classroom, they really get a chance to grow and shine. And I'll end with that. Feel free to ask any questions.
Yes, if anyone has any questions, you can put your microphone on. I'm going to say actually thank you at this point because I just need to disappear off into another room to set it up. But keep asking questions. You've got as much time as you want. Our next sessions don't start for 20 minutes. But I just want to say thank you very much, Dana. That was just brilliant. And we just got so much from it. It'd be great if you could upload a few things as people said so we can have a look at them later because it's definitely something we want to have a look at. If you think this presentation was interesting for someone who may have missed it, don't forget you can always go back and see the recorded session. And that's it. Thank you so much, Dana, and thank you so much for coming to your first iMoot, and I hope it's the first of many. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If you click on the videos, do they lead you right to the site, or do you want me to go back and click them, add them all in? Because when I click on it, it goes straight to a video. So if someone could try real quick, and then I'll know if you can see it. Yep, it worked. Okay, good. Oh, perfect, perfect. Okay, good. So they'll all lead you right to the YouTube. Perfect. Oh, I use Haiku Deck, and you can use it on both. I absolutely love this. It's like the easiest thing ever, and it makes it look so beautiful. But Haiku Deck, you can use it either on an iPad, you can use it on a laptop, anything. And the images are just stunning. And then you can export them into Keynote, into PowerPoint as a PDF, or into a Google presentation, which helps a lot. Oh, okay, I can add the links into the Moodle course, no problem. It'll take me just a few minutes to do it, but I'll get on it right away. My students this year are 9th through 12th grade. I have mixed ages. In my programming class and my game design class, it's across the board, 9 through 12. And then so they're age 14 through 18. And then my juniors, my English course, they are all about 16, 17 years old. And but then I also next year will be across the school, middle school and high school, so about age 10 through age 18. And I kind of feel like I belong in both schools. I've taught both middle school and high school, and I have equal love for both and in the ages of both. I started off in higher ed, and I've taught higher ed even quite recently, even online. I've been teaching online courses for higher ed for the past couple of years. But I think there's something about, I don't know, kids in a school and I don't know, when they're so young and impressionable that I absolutely love. But then again, I love adult learning too, because then you know they're serious and they really want to learn. So I like all ages. My email is teachwatts at gmail.com, and on Twitter I'm just at teachwatts. So if at any point you think of any questions, or you're like, what was that thing that you said, or can you help? I don't remember this. Feel free to email me at any time. Oh, well, it's interesting. So the question about higher ed. So for higher ed this year, well, for the past 4 years, I've been working on my doctorate. And although I do an insane amount of writing, honestly, for my doctorate, a lot of my courses actually have not, they've tried to incorporate different creative assessment. So for instance, I've had to create audio or video type. One of my favorite ones is Explain Everything, where I've taken kind of screenshots of different articles and different research, and then I've gone through and explained my thinking and my analysis of the entire article and research. So I think sometimes video can be accurate for assessment because you can hear their thinking, and so it depends on in higher ed exactly what the context is. If they're looking at the molecular structure of something, they could still go through and break that down and tear it apart in a way that's not an essay, I believe. Um, can they do that through a ballet? I'm not quite so certain. But they can do it also. I'm working right now with our AP honors biology teacher, and we are working on different cell structures and having the students recreate those with our 3D printer. So they're putting them together and actually constructing them about what they think they would look like. And so that tactile piece is still there, and they're kind of putting them together themselves. And so I think it's definitely different than a lab or an essay of sorts, but it's still something a little bit different. I don't know, Russell. I think it depends on the context of the course, but it can be. I think there's more than one way. And as someone who teaches English, I don't know. I'm so tired of reading essays. and writing them. I just wrote a 116-page paper for my proposal for my dissertation, so I understand. There's a lot of them. Well, thank you everyone for coming. I really hope you have a wonderful day and a great weekend. I hope the sun's shining wherever you are and there's warm weather and you have great people to hang out with this weekend.